Hi guys, welcome back to another video. I'm Jay. If we haven't met before, I'm a speaker, author, guide, and facilitator. And I love helping women just like you who are inspired, inspirational, and deeply intuitive unlock your deepest gifts and liberate your creativity from the prison of your mind so you can thrive. I love being here and I love filming these videos, and this one I feel like there's a little bit of resistance around, which means that it's even more important to the evolution of my soul. So I'm just going to allow what needs to be said, and really looking forward to seeing what comes out and hearing myself really clearly. This afternoon I want to speak to something that has been really close to my heart for a long time, and we're going to talk about children. We're going to talk about children's well-being, and we're going to talk about parenting. I don't claim to be an expert on parenting. I don't want to be an expert on parenting, at least not yet, until I've had my own children. But what I do know is a lot about the relationship and the dynamic between parents and children from the perspective of the child. I've been blessed to know, and experience and remember a lot from my childhood. And obviously, those memories are through the lens of a young, developing, forming human being. But through all of that, I've, delved deep into my past, into my history, and looked at how the wounds that were inflicted in childhood have kind of carried through and given me opportunities to heal in adolescence and early adulthood. I mean, I didn't really properly start doing any healing until I was like probably in my early 20s, but there was a real sense for me of like needing to go back. And I've always felt this sense that like I need to go back to be able to go forward. And I read a journal entry that I'd written the other day, and it was a quote from Neil Strauss, and he said he wrote The Truth. He wrote The Game. He was like a pickup artist, and then he wrote a book called The Truth. And he came out and said the wounds of the parents become the destinies of the children unless the children wake up and do something to change them. And I remember that quote just ringing so true for me, because if we aren't actively working there's a natural evolution that happens with humanity. There's a natural kind of progression of the species that we kind of are going to evolve. We're going to be, an expression that is like a little bit more developed than that of the generation before us, no matter what. And there's also so much consciousness that needs to be held, and there's so much like work that needs to be done in order to make sure that we're not passing things from our parents onto our children. And making sure that also just like the cycle of things stops with us and the cycle ends with us. And I was working in early childhood a couple of years ago, and like after school care. And I remember just being absolutely astonished by the behavior of staff members and by the way that these children were treated. And I want to focus on like what's really important here, which is where we're going. Like rather than where we've been, I guess where we're at is also really important. And I do want to shed some light on that, because I feel like there's this like collective blindness to the way that children are treated in this culture. And I think a lot of it is completely unconscious. When you bring this stuff to the light, you realize, and I had this revelation the other day, that like actually parents, they deeply love their children. It's biological, it's chemical. They can't not all parents, I guess sometimes those wires get crossed and things go awry, but I think there's just they're not doing this on purpose. What I think happens is there's just this, because children are so precious and because they are so vulnerable, the space that you need to go into in order to feel empathy for a child, like, you think it comes really naturally, and it does to a certain extent, but to really fully access the like acute vulnerability of a child and the preciousness and the sensitivity of a human being in its, early stages of development, it requires this insane level of emotional availability. You've got to be like unbelievably willing to feel the deepest of the deep, the hardest of the hard, the most like acutely painful, excruciating, like just the fullness of these emotions. Because, and most people just aren't there yet. Like most people's emotional range just isn't there yet. But in order to really understand, and this is why, a lot of people have wounds and things that they've repressed from childhood, because to actually feel the fullness of these emotions and, experience and actually, really remember how it felt to be that small and that, that helpless, and that all of the feelings that you felt when you were little, it would just require a level of emotional like willingness that a lot of people don't have yet. And because they don't have that, then they're unwilling to kind of see and, you know, feel empathy, or just unable to feel empathy for the children in their care, or the children, you know, of the world around them. But what's happening and what's really exciting is that as children with this incredible emotional availability and intelligence and this capacity for deep feeling are growing up, you know, we're doing our work, we're healing, we're having these wonderful, like, enlightening experiences, and we're surviving, which is like, oh, this makes me so happy. Because, you know, in the past, I think it would have just been, you know, people who go through childhood trauma didn't have as many resources available to them, and so their path was usually like addiction, you know, PTSD that wasn't kind of healed, and it was just a lot like harder back in the day. I mean, it's still hard, like there's no two ways about it. It is like you go through hell and you come out the other side. What is happening now, though, is like, you know, as more and more awareness is coming to light about this, and, you know, it's like the survival rate for highly sensitive children, or just for children, you know, as we journey into adulthood. And not only survival, but like survival with our sensitivity intact, because it's one thing to like make it through and to be like, all right, I'm here, like I'm an adult, like, oh, we did it. But then it's another thing entirely to be like, whoa, I'm like a fully functioning, capable, securely attached adult who's like thriving in the world. And this is the thing, like we're, you know, surviving, and we're piecing together all these pieces of our healing puzzle and our journey. And we're like, whoa, we're like really shining really, really brightly in the world. And because we're able to do that, then we're able to kind of go back down, you know, and help those coming along the path after us, and shed some light and awareness on like the actual sensitivities of children, and just be like, hang on a second, like that was actually really messed up. Like what I went through, what I experienced, like this is like, you can't do that anymore. And, you know, I had a dream last night where I was like a voice for the voiceless, and I was speaking up for these women who couldn't speak up for themselves. And I think it's really important because, you know, as a child, and, you know, when you're growing up, and it's just like in an environment where like everyone's bigger than you, everyone's more powerful than you, where your survival is dependent on like other people who you can't control. Like it's such a vulnerable state to be in. But, you know, I think it's so important that those of us who are kind of healing the wounds of our childhood are standing up and speaking out, and really being like, okay, we need to be way more aware of the way that we're treating our children, and just way more like they're so much more deeply sensitive and deeply feeling than a lot of people realize. I had this experience the other night at a restaurant, and I think, again, I don't think parents or mothers like know that they're doing this when they're doing it, but there seems to be this tendency to kind of like brush off your children in the presence of other adults. And like, you know, I was having a conversation and just different things, and people said something around like, a child was like whispering to her parent, and the parent said something about, oh, like to me, it's probably nothing important, and little things like that. And, you know, making comments about like, you know, the child's behavior in the presence of other adults, like speaking negatively or derogatively about the child in front of other adults. You don't realize like humiliation is a big emotion that comes up when we're dealing with this work and we're doing this. Like, and humiliation is a feeling that I think most adults would probably avoid like the plague. Like, I don't know, you know, that anyone would kind of consciously want to dig deep and feel humiliation. But it is one of those experiences that I think children have way more than we realize. And purely because, like, again, this isn't done like, you know, you're not doing it on purpose, but purely because of the context in which they find themselves, where it's like they are in a situation where they already feel like they're already all smaller than everyone else. They already feel vulnerable and kind of helpless in a sense. But then to be kind of publicly called out, especially at an age where they're developing a sense of self, they're developing a sense of identity, and they're developing a sense of self-worth. Like, if they don't, you know, if they're not taught to really value that intrinsic sense of their own brilliance and genius and like incorruptible love, then children are kind of looking outwardly, and children are doing this anyway. It's like, you know, part of their development, to kind of looking for clues and signs about how they should see themselves and how they should, you know, like be in the world. It's like a wolf cub, you know, comes into the world and it's looking at its mom being like, all right, like how do we do this? How do we, you know, hunt and kill and run and all of these different things. And it's like your children are looking to you for guidance, for advice, for examples about how to be a human. And as much as we are like, you know, programmed with these incredible soul blueprints now and this amazing DNA that's just coming online and it's activating, and we know because we've been here a million times and we've done this life, you know, human life experience before. It's also like, you know, I don't think that can negate at all the natural stages of development, like human development. And we still need to go through these stages, and we still need to successfully complete these initiations through into early adulthood and adulthood. And so, you know, just being so mindful of the way that you speak about your child and to your child when you're around other people, just knowing that they are listening to you, they are getting their cues from you about how to treat themselves and how to feel about themselves. And also just knowing that they are looking to you for an example of like how they should be in the world and how they get to be. Like you're, you know, in those first 7 years, like they're absorbing so much about the world, and so much of their subconscious programming is happening in those first 7 years. So they're really like building their foundation, and they're looking to you to kind of be that for them and, you know, help them. You know, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man? Like all of these things. What does it mean to be me? Like, what does it mean to be us? What does it mean to be us in this family, or me in this family? And so you have so much more power than you realize. And I think that's, you know, there's this perpetuating cycle where, you know, adults feel powerless in their own lives, and so they're completely unconscious of the power that they have in their children's lives. And it's like the more that we kind of become aware of our own power just as human beings, like just in general, as like adult men, women experience this power that we have, the more conscious that we become, you know, of our power in relationship with other people, or relationship to other people, and especially our children, because oh my gosh, like they're so like, yeah, they're looking to you for so much. So keep that in mind. There's just so much to be said. I mean, the kind of behavior and the things that I witnessed at this particular center were just tragic and horrific. And I feel like I'm kind of navigating my own experience of being able to help in any way that I can and figure out what the most effective way is to kind of bring voice to this, because I understand that like a lot of the, you know, the nuance of it is that like my own experience of like having a wounded inner child and having that, you know, is very much coloring my experience of like these interactions, or was coloring my experience with those, you know, in interactions with those children. And it's like how much of this is me trying to, but I think it's both and this is part of the healing, is like, you know, wanting to stand up for your own inner child and all the ways that you were like oppressed and shamed and all these different things. But then also, you know, part of that is being able to be a voice for other children as well, and just bringing so much awareness to what's actually happening. And I want you to kind of open your eyes to it, like as you look through the world, and be really cognizant of how people around you are treating children, how parents are treating their children when, you know, you're out in the world, how teachers are speaking to the children in their care. And then imagine, like, you know, think about if that was you in that position. Like you've got someone who is, you know, most, you know, they'll think about a 3-year-old, most adults are like 3 times the size of them, right? And you've got someone who's 3 times the size of you, who already has like, you know, power, autonomy and control, in the sense that, you know, as a child, you can't like emancipate yourself and go out, and children have done this, like it's not to say that they haven't, but you're like, you can't just walk out and start a life of your own, you know, like you're dependent for your, you know, or at least you very much believe that you are, and you are to a certain extent, on these people around you, your caregivers, for survival, for education, for like all of these different things. Like you are actually dependent. And then, you know, imagine that these people are belittling you. Imagine that they're kind of making offhanded comments. Imagine that they're ignoring you. Imagine that they don't, you know, even really take the time to actually get to know you and understand you. They just kind of want to like project all this stuff onto you. And it's like, this is, I want to like come at this from both sides, because I also know that like, you know, adults in the world are just children, exactly like they're just children a little bit further along in their journey. Like they just haven't been able to, you know, like this is, you know, one of my favorite things that I've heard is like grace is being able to give what we never got. And it's so unfair, it's so unbelievably unfair, but it's also like, this is the journey, like this is the journey that we all need to go on in order to break these cycles and change. Like I think about, there's so much change that's happened in one generation in my family. Like I think about the cycles that we've broken, cycles of addiction, of trauma, of codependency, of abuse, of neglect, like really being able to like flourish and thrive in a family environment, in a family system now. Like that's happened in one generation. Like the quantum leap is just, it's astronomical, and makes me so excited, because like if we can do that in one generation, like that's what we really need to focus on like right now, is like, what are you doing in your like your link in the family tree, like your branch from the family tree, like your place in that? What are you doing to, you know, do what you came here to do? Like how are you helping to evolve to kind of make sure that, you know, the change that you want to make and see in your family is happening? Like, how are you kind of stepping up and leading the charge? It just like so much of it comes back to your own experience in your own life. How are you treating yourself? How are you like leading your own healing journey? How are you leading yourself through this experience? How are you like changing your own behaviors and seeking the help that you need and the support, and just like, you know, getting out there and doing your own thing and being that example. And then how are you kind of changing the way, and be really conscious about this, like be really like actually write it down, like, you know, sit down and have some space to actually be like, okay, so what are the things that I didn't like about my childhood and my upbringing? And what are the things that I, as you know, speak from your inner child, let your inner child have a voice. Be like, okay, what are the things that you wish that we've been able to do more of? How do you wish that you've been treated? Like, I talk a lot about women who run with wolves. I'm going to speak about it again, but you know, there's a quote around, it's not, you know, a lot of parenting is just sitting back and observing. It's just allowing your child to show you who they are. And rather than kind of intervening, and this is so like, you know, it's interesting for me because I'm, even with clients, like I want to kind of, you know, get in there and like, I'm very hands-on, but it's like, it's a lot of it is just observation. It's just sitting back and being like, okay, so show me who you are. And what a gift. And I think it's, you know, it probably evokes a lot of jealousy. Like, if we're being honest, there's jealousy because why do they get to have, you know, this blessed childhood that we never had? Why does the next generation get to have, you know, this is obviously not my most enlightened response, but I've definitely had it. Like, why do they get to have it and we didn't? But I think, you know, this is like when we're talking about bringing forth the, you know, manifesting the ideals and the visions of our deepest and truest and most noblest heart, you actually just, you know, you've got to not push it all out of your mind, but we're not acting from that place. We've got to move from this place of like, you know, this is what's really important. This is what's really true. This is what's really good and pure and holy. And I'm going to, you know, live out things from that place. And so it's just, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Like, this is, you know, this is how we treat our children and how we raise children is like one of the most, if not the most powerful tool that we have for changing the world. You are literally creating the next generation of human beings that are going to exist on this planet. And so, you know, imagine like, and again, it's not, you know, it is shaping, it's like helping them to become who they are, which is like not, you know, making them anything. It's like they already are amazing. The children coming through, like everyone already has the gifts and skills that they need inside of them. It's just like sitting back and letting them unfold, and then refining them and helping them like challenge them in the certain the ways that they need to grow, and just, yeah, let them become more of themselves, and then help them when you can, by like encouraging the things that you can see in them, and encouraging the beautiful things that you can see in them, and helping them to overcome their challenges, and even just knowing these things about your child, like just knowing like their life path, and knowing their just knowing their human design or their gene keys, their astrology, like that sort of stuff is just little steps in that make massive difference over time. So yeah. All right, I'm gonna leave it there. Go and give your children a big beautiful hug, and then give yourself a big beautiful hug, your inner child. And yeah, we really need to look out for those who can't look out for themselves just yet. They're still learning. I love you. Have a beautiful rest of your day.